The lights inside the studio were shining brightly. The music played loudly as the audience clapped and cheered. It was a regular evening on the famous Jimmy Kimmel live show. Jimmy sat behind his desk with his usual charming smile. The atmosphere was happy, full of jokes and laughter. People sitting at home expected another funny night of entertainment. But they didn't know they were about to see something different, something much more serious. Tonight's guest was the famous British actor Tom Hardy. When his name was announced, the cheers grew louder. Hardy walked confidently onto the stage, dressed simply in a dark suit with no tie, looking sharp but relaxed. His smile was soft, and he waved at the crowd before sitting down next to Jimmy. People were excited to hear from him. He was there to talk about his new charity documentary that focused on helping forgotten war veterans. At first, everything felt normal. Jimmy joked about Tom's action movies and teased him about doing stunts himself. The crowd laughed loudly. Tom laughed too, answering with clever remarks. He talked about his documentary, explaining how many soldiers were ignored after returning home from war. His voice was soft but full of emotion. He explained why helping them was personal for him, and the audience clapped, feeling the message. Jimmy smiled and nodded, but soon his questions started to change. He asked Tom about his younger years, mentioning his struggles with alcohol and problems with anger. "You've been through quite the storm yourself," Jimmy said with a grin. "Now you're trying to fix the world too." The audience laughed, but Tom's smile became smaller. He answered calmly, "Everyone fights their own battles, Jimmy. I've just chosen to fight mine publicly." Jimmy laughed it off, but people could feel a small shift in the mood. The easy laughter started to fade, replaced by something heavier in the air. Then Jimmy moved to a more serious topic. He asked Tom, "You've spoken loudly about your country's politics before. You've even criticized the U.S. military involvement overseas. So tell me, what do you think about NATO's latest decisions and America's growing involvement in Europe?" Tom's smile disappeared completely. His jaw tightened, and he sat back in his chair. There was a brief silence. Just a few seconds, but it felt much longer. The live audience stayed quiet, sensing something was changing. Tom replied slowly, "I came here to talk about soldiers who risked their lives and are now forgotten. I didn't come here to be dragged into political discussions." Jimmy smiled wider, but there was a sharpness in his voice. "But Tom," he said, "you have millions of fans. You've used your platform before to talk about politics. Don't you think you should use it now, when the world needs clear voices?" Tom's expression turned colder. "Clear voices? You mean voices that say what they're told to say?" The audience gave a few nervous laughs, unsure whether it was a joke or something more serious. Tom leaned forward slightly. "You know, Jimmy, the problem is not people like me talking about politics. The problem is the people who control the stage, who decide what people hear and what they don't." Jimmy tried to lighten the moment with another joke. "Read questions from cards, Tom. I'm not starting any wars." But Tom didn't laugh. His voice became firmer. "Exactly, Jimmy. You're handed cards, you're told what to ask. While people out there are sent to war, sometimes for reasons no one explains." The room grew quieter. Jimmy blinked, slightly caught off guard, but tried to stay calm. "Well, isn't it dangerous for celebrities to jump into world politics without knowing all the facts?" he asked. Tom's response was immediate. "And it's not dangerous when politicians hide behind entertainment to cover up the truth." That sentence landed like a punch. The audience stayed silent. The camera showed Jimmy shifting uncomfortably in his chair, his famous smile fading just a little. The producers behind the scenes were moving quickly, whispering, signaling to each other, worried about where this interview was heading. Jimmy cleared his throat, trying to smile again. "We were here to talk about your documentary, Tom, about helping veterans. Let's not turn this into an angry debate." But Tom stayed focused. His voice remained calm but strong. "This is about veterans, Jimmy. This is about why they are forgotten. This is about why young men and women are sent to fight wars that have nothing to do with protecting their homes. At that moment, the friendly, casual interview had completely changed. It was no longer about movie promotions. It wasn't about funny stories. It had turned into something deeper, something raw. Jimmy looked at the camera for a brief second, perhaps wondering if he should cut to commercial. The audience didn't laugh anymore. They watched quietly, feeling the tension between the two men sitting just a few feet apart. Some people in the audience looked uncomfortable. Others looked curious, leaning forward to catch every word. For years, late-night shows were known for laughter and celebrity gossip. But tonight, something different was happening. A real conversation, a confrontation, was happening in front of millions of people. Tom sat straight, his eyes sharp. Jimmy tried to stay relaxed, but his hands fidgeted with his papers. No one could predict how this interview would end. The people in the studio could feel it. The millions watching at home could feel it too. Something big was about to happen. Tom Hardy sat silently for a moment, his body still but his eyes full of energy. The crowd stayed quiet, confused about what was happening. The show had changed from fun to something sharp and uncomfortable. Jimmy tried to keep his smile, but his face looked tighter, his words more careful. "So, Tom," Jimmy said, trying to lighten the mood again, "isn't it sometimes easier to just enjoy the good life? You've made it. Movies, money, family. Why step into politics when you could just stay happy?" Tom took a slow breath. His voice was calm, but there was a cold edge in it. "'Cause I know people who can't stay happy, Jimmy. Soldiers who come back broken. People sent to fight for reasons they didn't understand. And then they come back to no support, no help, just cameras and talk shows pretending everything is fine." Some people in the audience clapped softly, but most stayed quiet. Everyone could feel Tom was not joking anymore. Jimmy shifted in, his chair again, his eyes moving towards the producers behind the cameras. Maybe he wanted to change the subject, but Tom wasn't letting it go. Jimmy tried again. "But you've spoken before about meeting with politicians, about going to London, even having private dinners with European leaders. There's talk you've been getting too close to these people. Do you want to be an actor or a politician?" Tom's jaw clenched. His voice dropped lower. "I've met with people because I want answers. Because when you stand in hospitals with soldiers missing legs and arms, when you see their families struggling, you stop caring about red carpets and after parties." Shmi cut in quickly. "But some say celebrities speaking on global politics just make things worse. If you don't have all the facts, Tom, isn't that dangerous?" Tom leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his stare fixed on Jimmy. "What's more dangerous, Jimmy? Asking questions about why people are dying? Or staying silent while governments make billions selling weapons?" Now there was complete silence in the studio. Not even nervous laughter came from the audience. The sound of Tom's voice was the only thing filling the room. Jimmy smiled awkwardly, flipping his note cards. "Look, Tom, I just read what they give me. I don't decide these topics." Tom didn't back down. "Exactly. If you read what you're told, you laugh at what you're told. And the public gets distracted while the real decisions happen in boardrooms and secret meetings." Smile dropped completely. His hands gripped the note cards tighter. He looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening. "So, are you saying the media, people like me, are part of the problem?" he asked carefully. Tom sat back again, his voice steady but heavy. "Not just you, Jimmy. The system, the game, the easy jokes, the fake fights between politicians on TV while lobbyists count their money behind closed doors." The producers were signaling frantically behind the cameras, but Jimmy ignored them. He had to face this moment now. "If what you're saying is true, why haven't you said this before?" Tom's answer was simple. "'Cause every time someone tries to speak up, they're shut down, called crazy, or told to stay in their lane. Well, I'm done staying in my lane." A ripple of gasps moved through the audience. The tension felt thick in the air. Jimmy looked completely cornered. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out for a second. Then he asked, "So, what are you going to do next, Tom?" Tom gave a small smile, but it wasn't warm. It was sharp. "I'm just getting started." And with those words, Tom Hardy stood up, unclipped his mic, and walked off the stage. The camera struggled to follow him as he walked through the curtains and disappeared. The studio was frozen. Jimmy sat alone at his desk, staring at the camera, unsure what to say. The audience didn't clap. They just watched, shocked. In that moment, a simple TV interview had turned into a political explosion. And it was only the beginning. The next morning, the entire internet was on fire. Every major news outlet had clips from Jimmy Kimmel's show playing on repeat. Headlines were bold and loud. Tom Hardy walks off live TV. Hardy's shocking words shake Hollywood. An actor blasts media and politicians on air. Social media exploded with millions of comments. Some people called Hardy a hero. Others accused him of disrespecting the show. But everyone agreed on one thing: something huge had just happened on live television. On the news channels, anchors debated what Hardy meant by his words. Political experts were invited to explain if his claims about hidden deals and forgotten soldiers were true. CNN ran the story under breaking news, while Al Jazeera held long discussions about the growing distrust between celebrities and governments. Even international news stations in Europe and Asia showed clips of the interview. At the White House, things were tense. During the daily press briefing, reporters bombarded the press secretary with questions about Hardy's comments. Does the president deny the allegations about secret military deals and forgotten veterans? Is the administration hiding facts from the public? The press secretary smiled carefully, saying, "We are aware of Mr. Hardy's comments. The administration is proud of its support for veterans. Any claims suggesting otherwise are irresponsible." Meanwhile, in London, reporters stood outside Parliament, asking British ministers if they had met with Hardy. One government official snapped, "He's an actor, not a diplomat," before quickly walking away from the cameras. Another politician quietly admitted he's raising questions people are afraid to ask. Late-night shows scrambled to respond. While Jimmy Kimmel stayed silent, other hosts either mocked or defended Hardy. Some joked that Hardy had lost his mind. Others praised him for showing bravery in front of millions. The divide was growing fast, not just in media, but across the world. Tom Hardy himself had disappeared from the public eye for a day. No interviews, no public statements. But then, just 24 hours later, he posted a video on his personal social media account. It was simple, just Hardy sitting in a quiet room. No makeup, no flashy lights. His message was clear and calm. "I knew the world would explode after what I said. I knew some people would hate me, some would love me. But I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to speak for those who have no stage, no microphone, no millions of followers. This isn't about me. It's about truth." Within minutes, his video had millions of views. People flooded his account with messages of support and anger. Some called him a voice of the people. Others warned him to stay out of politics. Soon after, strange things began to happen. Small leaks of documents started appearing online. Anonymous accounts posted photos of military spending reports and secret lobbying meetings. Independent journalists began digging into Hardy's claims. A famous investigative reporter from London released a short article stating, "There's more truth in Hardy's words than politicians want you to know." In Washington, a young senator known for speaking against corruption demanded an open investigation into the claims. "We can't dismiss this as a celebrity meltdown," she said during a live press conference. "We must follow the facts." Back on television, news anchors argued over whether Hardy was a brave whistleblower or just another actor chasing attention. But the more they argued, the more people watched the clips again. listened to Hardy's words again, and wondered, what if he was right? By the end of the week, it was no longer a Hollywood story. It was a political story. It was a story about governments, soldiers, money, and lies. Hardy had lit a fire that was spreading across 2 continents. Inside closed doors in Washington and London, leaders were angry. They wanted the story to die, but every attempt to silence it only made it grow bigger. Every denial made people more curious. Journalists kept digging, and Hardy kept pushing. The quiet life of an actor was gone. Tom Hardy had started a storm, and now the whole world was watching what would happen next. 2 days later, the world was watching a completely different Tom Hardy. He was no longer just an actor promoting a documentary. Now he sat in a small, simple studio, facing one of Europe's toughest investigative journalists, Seema Klein. The interview was being broadcast live across major networks in Europe, America, and even parts of Asia. It wasn't just entertainment anymore, it was news. Emma didn't waste time. Mr. Hardy, you said this isn't about you. Okay. Then why are you the one sitting here revealing these secrets? Tom's face was calm, but his eyes showed the pressure he was under. "'Cause I was given something, documents, files, information that shows the truth about wars, about politicians, about how the people in power make decisions that destroy lives while pretending it's for the greater good." Emma leaned forward. "Are you saying you have classified documents?" Tom nodded. "Not just documents, recordings, meeting notes, deals between defense companies, politicians, and media executives. Deals that send young men and women into endless wars while politicians get richer." The live chat on news channels exploded. Viewers demanded proof. Commentators argued on split screens. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others called it the biggest scandal of the decade. Emma pressed on. "If this is true, Tom, why come forward now?" Tom's answer was simple. "Because I looked into the eyes of veterans who were forgotten. I stood in rehab centers where soldiers sat in wheelchairs, while lobbyists bought yachts. Because I couldn't stay silent anymore." That same evening, Hardy's team released part of the documents online. Thousands of pages showing payments from defense companies to political campaigns, secret lobbying dinners, private flights arranged for lawmakers. They also released short audio recordings, senators joking about extending wars for business stability. Media producers discussing how to keep the public distracted with celebrity scandals. Governments across Europe and America went into defense mode. Statements were rushed out. "Old manipulated documents," said the Pentagon. "Baseless conspiracy," said Downing Street. Yet independent experts quickly confirmed that many of the documents were real. The numbers, the names, the signatures, they all matched official records. The protests began on the 3rd night after the interview. Veterans and their families gathered in front of government buildings in London, Paris, Berlin, and Washington. They carried signs saying, "We are not for sale, and our sacrifice is not their profit." Hashtags like #HardyLeaks and #TruthForVeterans began trending worldwide. Jimmy Kimmel's show was flooded with criticism. Advertisers pulled their commercials. Activists accused Jimmy of trying to humiliate Hardy while protecting the powerful. Jimmy stayed silent, but people noticed that his next few shows were strangely without political jokes. Hardy's own life changed rapidly. He received both love and hate. Crowds gathered outside his home, some chanting in support, others demanding he go back to acting. His security was increased after anonymous threats were made against him and his family. Meanwhile, several brave journalists started digging deeper. Emma Klein's next report showed that 2 of the largest defense companies in the world had secretly funded political campaigns across Europe and America. Another journalist revealed that a major TV network had buried stories about military corruption because of pressure from high-profile politicians. The most shocking moment came when Hardy released a short video. It was simple, just Hardy, looking tired but determined. "Sky," he said, "this is just the beginning. more will come out. They tried to buy me, they tried to scare me, but I'm not stopping because this isn't about me. It's about all of us. Within minutes, millions had viewed the video. It was shared by activists, veterans, journalists, and even some former politicians who had stayed silent for years. By the end of the week, it was no longer about Tom Hardy's walk-off moment. It had grown into a movement. Hardy had crossed a line no actor had crossed before taking real political power head-on. Using his platform not to entertain, but to expose. Governments stayed on high alert. The media was split in half. People in cities around the world gathered in protest. Lawsuits were threatened. Political leaders called for investigations, not into the corruption, but into Hardy himself. Tom? Hardy had started something far bigger than anyone had imagined. And the world was only starting to understand just how deep this scandal would go. The fifth day of the Hardy storm was unlike any before. Across Washington, D.C., the streets outside the Senate building were packed with veterans, students and activists holding banners. Chants echoed through the city demanding accountability from politicians and corporations. Inside the Capitol, tension was building for a hearing that had been called in record time. The Senate had summoned Tom Hardy to appear before them live, under oath broadcast around the world. Hardy entered the Grand Senate chamber dressed plainly in a gray suit. Cameras followed every step. Senators whispered among themselves. Some looked angry. Others looked nervous. The world was watching, and they knew this was no longer a TV scandal. This was a political crisis. The chairman, Senator Mallory, a known defender of the defense industry, cleared his throat. Mr. Hardy, you are here today because your accusations have caused unrest across the nation. You are not a government official, nor an elected representative. Explain why this body should listen to an actor. Tom Hardy leaned forward, speaking calmly into the microphone. I'm here because millions of soldiers don't have this microphone. I'm here because people with real power have sold their lives for profit, and no one inside these walls ever cared enough to stop it. The room fell silent. Even the most powerful senators didn't interrupt. Hardy continued, explaining how. The documents were passed to him through whistleblowers, men and women who were too afraid to go public. He talked about the payments from defense companies, the deliberate lies told to media outlets, and the way entertainment was used to cover up the truth. Senator Mallory shook his head. This is reckless, Mr. Hardy. You are causing unnecessary anger. You are no expert on geopolitics. Tom's voice hardened. I don't need to be a geopolitical expert to know when young people are dying, for wars that only benefit billionaires. I don't need to be a senator to see the lobbyist dinners, the private jets, the secret deals. Some senators exchanged worried glances. The cameras captured everything. Broadcasting Hardy's words lived to millions of people sitting in their homes, offices, and schools. Then something unexpected happened. Senator Clara Reyes, one of the youngest members of the Senate, interrupted. The chairman. She turned to Hardy. You said you have more evidence? Are you willing to submit it to this committee right now? Tom nodded. I am. The crowd outside cheered as Hardy handed over two thick folders of documents. Senator. Reyes quickly scanned the papers. Her expression changed from skepticism to shock. She held up one page. This document shows a private dinner between members of this committee and the CEO of a defense contractor, weeks before voting on a multi-billion-dollar defense bill. The room exploded into noise. Journalists outside the chamber scrambled. To report the breaking news, Senator Mallory banged his gavel. Order, this is highly irresponsible. But Senator Reyes was no longer listening. She flipped through more pages, reading aloud sections that revealed secret campaign donations, manipulation of media stories, and contracts signed in hidden meetings. Tom Hardy sat silently as chaos unfolded around him. People watching at home couldn't believe what they were seeing. For years, politicians had denied any wrongdoing. Now, in front of the entire world, those denials were falling apart. Senator Mallory tried to cut the session short, but Reyes stood up. Mr. Chairman, the people deserve to hear the truth. This hearing must continue. Back outside, the protests doubled in size. Around the world, news anchors delivered live reports on the Senate chaos. The stock market showed defense companies losing billions in value as investors panicked. Later, that evening, Hardy walked out of the Senate building surrounded by security. Reporters rushed toward him, asking if he feared for his safety. He answered simply, "I fear silence more than threats." At home, people talked about Hardy not as an actor, but as a fighter, someone who stood up in a room full of power and meat. A prominent at L's of power and refused to be silenced. For the first time, politicians were under real pressure to answer for their hidden deals. Jimmy Kimmel, watching from his studio, felt the weight of his own silence. His producers asked if they should prepare a segment about Hardy's hearing. Jimmy only said, "No jokes tonight. People need to see the truth." And so, as the fifth day closed, Tom Hardy had done something rare. He had taken on the most powerful institution in his country and made them tremble. But the storm was far from over. Bigger secrets were yet to come, and the world was now fully awake. The scandal grew heavier with each passing day. News outlets no longer focused on entertainment, gossip, or celebrity fashion. Every major headline was about the shocking evidence Tom Hardy had exposed. Protests spread from Washington to London, from Paris to Berlin. Crowds gathered outside Parliament buildings chanting for answers. Politicians who once smiled comfortably behind cameras now hurried through back doors, avoiding questions. Hardy stayed mostly silent, but his team kept releasing documents, little by little. Each batch revealed deeper corruption contracts. Signed in secret, wars extended to protect oil deals. Media channels paid to promote fake patriotic stories. Even the biggest media companies were exposed. The world realized this wasn't just about one country. It was a global network of power, money, and lies. Emma Klein, the fearless journalist who had first interviewed Hardy, broke her biggest story yet. Her investigation linked a powerful London-based think tank to politicians in both Europe and the U.S. This think tank was quietly funded by defense companies, oil giants, and old intelligence officers. They wrote reports that shaped government policies. They gave speeches on national security while secretly pushing for new military conflicts. Their influence reached presidents, prime ministers, and famous TV personalities. Tom Hardy knew the risk. Threats against him grew louder. Private security surrounded his home. A leak from an intelligence agency even revealed that some politicians wanted him arrested for spreading classified information. But arresting him would turn the fire into an explosion, and the world's governments understood that too. Well, meanwhile, several governments launched emergency inquiries. In Britain, opposition parties forced a parliamentary session. The Prime Minister denied any wrongdoing, but his answers were shaky. In America, Senator Clara Reyes demanded a full independent investigation, calling it the largest betrayal of military families in modern history. Journalists uncovered connections between Hollywood producers and political spin doctors. Famous talk shows had been given safe topics to avoid mentioning certain scandals. Movies were funded by hidden investors to push patriotic messages during times of war. Hardy's words on Jimmy Kimmel's show were no longer just a bold opinion, they were the starting point of a global reckoning. Inside late-night studios, hosts started changing their tone. Jimmy Kimmel finally spoke after days of silence. Sitting alone in front of his audience, his face serious, he said, "I made fun of a man who was trying to help. I laughed when I should have listened. I owe you all an apology." The crowd stayed quiet, absorbing every word. In the corporate world, the damage was clear. Stocks and defense companies fell sharply. Oil giants faced angry protests outside. Their offices, Big media companies lost millions of viewers, who now preferred independent journalists digging for truth rather than polished news anchors reading scripted lines. But the hardest pressure fell on the politicians. Campaign donors pulled back. Elections approached, and the scandal grew hotter. Governments tried to shift the focus to other issues: immigration, crime, tax policies, but people were not distracted. This time, Hardy had exposed too much, and the world was paying attention. For Hardy, there was no way back to a normal life. He wasn't promoting movies or attending red carpets. He gave interviews only to independent journalists, always calm, always focused. "This is not about me," he repeated. "This is about stopping the system that profits from blood." Veterans groups joined together in dozens of countries, demanding changes to military policies. Some countries announced early resignations of top defense officials. A few bold lawmakers started drafting new laws to limit corporate influence on politics. But behind the scenes, Hardy knew the fight wasn't over. There were powerful people who hadn't been touched, yet former intelligence chiefs, discreet financiers, international diplomats. Hardy had documents naming them, showing how they pulled strings from the shadows. Emma Klein warned on her news, "Show if what we are seeing is true, this is only the surface. The real power lies deeper, hidden from public view." And Tom Hardy, sitting quietly in his protected home, knew exactly what had to happen next. The world had woken up, but the hidden hand was still in control. Hardy's next step was not just to expose them, was to bring them out into the open, no matter the risk. As protests continued and governments trembled, one question filled the streets. If one actor could cause this much damage to the system, what would happen when the final truth came out? The storm wasn't ending. Was getting stronger? The world entered a historic week. Cities across Europe and America were filled with marches, protests, and endless breaking news updates. Streets that were once quiet were now alive with chants for justice. But this time, the protests were not about single policies. They were about the system itself. The world had been shown the truth, but Tom Hardy knew the most dangerous part had yet to be revealed. At midnight, Hardy released his final and most explosive video. There was no dramatic music, no expensive studio, just Hardy sitting at a wooden desk, looking straight into the camera. His voice was steady but heavy with emotion. "I've shown you how politicians sell soldiers for profit," Hardy began. "I've shown you how media companies distract you with jokes while lobbyists steal your future. But now, you will see who truly runs your world." Within minutes, Hardy's team uploaded thousands of documents, bank transfers, private flight logs, secret emails, and confidential reports. They exposed the hidden hands behind governments, a circle of ex-intelligence chiefs, oil barons, weapons dealers, and financial giants who quietly decided where wars would be fought, which countries would collapse, and which leaders would rise. The documents revealed private messages from world leaders taking direct orders from these hidden powers. Some emails even showed entertainment executives asking, "How can we make this war popular to the public?" By sunrise, news anchors were speechless. Governments issued emergency statements, some calling the documents dangerous misinformation, others too afraid to speak at all. Financial markets crashed. Defense company stocks were in free fall. Public trust in governments broke down faster than anyone imagined. In London, the Prime Minister's office was locked down as members of Parliament walked out in protest. In Washington, top senators resigned live on air, confessing to being part of lobbying rings. In Paris, a former defense minister was arrested trying to board a private jet. Jimmy Kimmel appeared on TV, looking older and more serious. "I once laughed at Tom Hardy," he admitted. "Now I stand corrected." The man was right, and we were part of the distraction. But it wasn't just politicians and media personalities who were shaken. For the first time, major Hollywood stars, athletes, and global influencers broke their silence. Many confessed they had taken part in political promotions they didn't fully understand. Others admitted they were pressured to stay quiet. Veterans groups declared victory on the streets, but warned this is just the first step. Soldiers came forward with stories of how their sacrifices were wasted for corporate profits. Families of fallen heroes demanded justice. International courts opened fast-track investigations. Secret bank accounts in Switzerland and offshore islands were frozen. Dozens of countries announced new elections. Laws were proposed to end corporate lobbying, to punish media corruption, and to limit defense spending. Through all of it, Tom Hardy stayed away from cameras. He didn't give interviews. He simply released a final written message. My work here is done. Now it's your turn. For weeks, people searched for him. Some said he was in Europe under protection. Others believed he had left for a quiet life away from fame. Wherever he was, his actions had changed history. The world would never be the same. Leaders who thought they were untouchable were now being questioned, tried, and even imprisoned. Governments were forced to listen to their people. Media companies were forced to be transparent. Citizens, once divided by politics, were united by truth. In the end, Tom Hardy did what few had dared to try. He shattered the illusion, exposed the hidden power, and forced the world to face its own reflection. And though his chair on late-night television was empty, his voice echoed through every newsroom, every parliament, and every protest, reminding the world that even the loudest systems of power can be silenced by the truth.